Hello everyone, Alec the SideQuest Gamer here, and this weekend I'm doing a top 10 list. I know it's not the most original concept in the universe, but hey, it does attract attention to this channel, and I could use the attention. And other than collecting footage from 10 different games being such a tedious chore, it's something I like to do occasionally. Now, this time I'm doing my top 10 favorite Super Nintendo games. I know it says top 10 best Super Nintendo games, but these are Super Nintendo games I personally think are the best, so it's also a favorites list if that applies. Now, you may not agree with some of these choices or the placement of some of these choices. Heck, you might not even like some of the games I put on this list, but this is just my opinion. I know I shouldn't have to remind you, but still, this internet doesn't know what an opinion is, apparently. Well, at least the 10% of internet users. But think of this as 10 Super Nintendo games you should at least try out if you haven't already. And of course I'm doing a one game per franchise rule like all the other top 10 lists, unless that franchise occupies multiple genres and is the masters of both of those genres. But without further ado, let's roll the footage and get started with this top 10 list. Number 10, Super Mario Kart. This game doesn't get nearly enough credit it deserves. While it didn't invent the racing genre, Super Mario Kart was the first I've known to take beloved characters from a rich universe and have them do competitive racing, which others did replicate later in the years. With things like power-ups that can hinder your opponent's progress or increase your own progress, Super Mario Kart is a racing game I often go back to. While it's often overshadowed by the later sequels, most notably Mario Kart 64, it's definitely worth playing through, and I honestly wish more games played like it, because there's just some undeniable charm with Super Mario Kart. Number 9, Super Mario RPG Legend of the Seven Stars. Yes, it is a bit redundant to have Mario's name be on this list so many times, but this game is simply unique. What do you get when Masters of RPGs being Squaresoft and the Masters of Platformers being Nintendo come together? You get this game. This idea should have failed. I mean, a platformer star in a turn-based RPG? How would that work? It did. It really did work, and while it's very easy for RPG standards, the combat was simply unique and didn't feel cliché. While the pre-rendered 3D graphics don't look as good as Donkey Kong Country, I still think they're very charming nonetheless. I especially love how this game had a wacky sense of humor and even poked fun at its own universe. You owe it to yourself to give this one a try, as you can say it paved the way to the highly revered Paper Mario and Luigi RPG games. Number 8, Star Fox. Competition was fierce between the Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis, and they were constantly trying to innovate more than one another just to get sales. And while the Super Effects chip games weren't the saving grace for the Super Nintendo, unlike 1994's pre-rendered Donkey Kong Country, Star Fox was still a great game in its own right. It is forgotten about nowadays in favor of the 64-bit sequel, but we can't forget what Star Fox did for gaming. We have a 3D rail shooter on a console, of all things, that played pretty well, and while the polygonal graphics seem dated, the gameplay is still as fresh as it was 20 years ago. So give this one a try if you're a collector for used Super Nintendo games, as this one still doesn't have a Wii U eShop release. Come on, Nintendo! Give us Star Fox! We need Star Fox. You're depriving us of history. Number 7, Mega Man X. I mean, Mega Man X2. Ha, yeah, bet you didn't see that coming. Everyone who has played the X series often dismisses Mega Man X2 as just okay, while X1 is the greatest game of all time. Look, I love X1 a lot, but I personally prefer X2. It has great setting, great atmosphere in some levels, the same fast-paced action from the first game except with new bosses, new levels, and new power-ups. Some may dismiss it as more of the same, but I don't care. I like to think of it as Mega Man X, but more. I really like the optional side quests where you fight the 3 main antagonists of the game who are known as X-Hunters. They're kind of mad that you killed Sigma, by the way, and they don't underestimate you, unlike the Robot Masters from the previous game. Sure, the reward for defeating them is very underwhelming and disappointing, but it's still a very nice touch. And really, with Sigma's supposed death, this is a game where I felt the most like a Maverick Hunter, if that makes any sense to you, because that's what I was doing the whole time, hunting Mavericks. Seriously, play the first one and the second one as well, but get the second one on the Wii U eShop because, well, a loose cart is pretty expensive. Number 6. Please don't kill me for the placement of this game, but Super Mario World. Yes, it's the most cliche entry, but it was either this or Yoshi's Island, and I had to go with this one because Super Mario World is a Mario game I replay often. Well, Yoshi's Island, I do like it, but it does overstay its welcome in some levels. But Super Mario World, the original, it has some pretty solid level design. Yoshi, the admittedly overpowered cape feather, Yoshi, and for the Super Nintendo launch title, I really like the graphics, and the music is catchy too. And as a platformer, it's one of the finest entries in the genre. While I do prefer the third game because, again, the cape feather kind of breaks this game if you exploit it in your favor, there is a reason why I, as well as many other of my fellow gamers, love this game as they do. I say give it a look, but let's face it, you already have. Number 5. Final Fantasy VI. This RPG knows how to tell a story where evil mostly triumphs over the innocent until the heroes rise up and then triumph over the villains temporarily until one of them unleashes destruction on the world and they win again. And the heroes have to find the courage to try again and defeat this evil once and for all. This game is by far my favorite in the series. I know many of you will say either 4 or 7 are the better games, and they are in their own merits. I just prefer the storytelling in Final Fantasy VI. Along with the active time turn-based combat and an excellent soundtrack, this is one RPG you must play before you die. I'm dead serious. And if you want to get into the series, either this or 4 are really good starting points. Number 4. Chrono Trigger. Yes, you've heard the internet praise this game back and forth. I was a skeptic of this game at first, but after I had my party travel to the desolate future only to learn the truth, it was starting to grow on me, and as I played more and more of it, I grew to love it. This is one RPG that, like the Super Nintendo era Final Fantasy games, has the active time turn-based system, but Chrono Trigger stands out as it involves time travel, but tells the story in a way where every little detail really matters in the overall time travel narrative. Like an NPC noticing how there are more frequent earthquakes, that wouldn't matter to you until you learn what might be causing those earthquakes. I also love how it ties together the main antagonist with all the other characters in their respective eras. You know the Fiend Lord in 600 AD? Well, there's a reason why he's a humanoid magic user and how he ties together with the other characters in Timeline. It also explains why there are 3 similar-looking old men in various time periods. It's just an epic adventure from start to finish, and with 13 alternate endings, I suggest you don't miss out on this one. Number 3. Super Metroid. Ah yes, Super Metroid, a speedrunner's favorite game of all time. Too bad I'm not a speedrunner. I'll be honest, I do like the Metroid games, but I'm not a huge fan of the Metroid series in general, as there's 2 I really like to replay every year, and 3 I like to go back to occasionally. But Super Metroid is definitely my favorite Metroid game, and I do plan on reviewing that one later this year. This game is so immersive, and I'd say it's pretty easy to get into. I love the graphics and atmospheric music so much. I love this game's version of Planet Zebes. It is so much fun to explore and get all the optional power-ups. And the introduction of a map system is a very welcome addition to the series. Seriously, I cannot stand revisiting the first 2 Metroid games because of a lack of a map system. Other than controls that take some getting used to, Super Metroid is a pretty solid game. While so far I've yet to get a 100% completion rating on this game, I will eventually, as this is probably the most replayable game on the Super Nintendo. Number 2. Donkey Kong Country 2. Diddy's Conquest. Yes, I know, like X2, this is another controversial entry. Well, not so much. The new general consensus is leaning towards Donkey Kong Country 2. But anyways, I always prefer the second one because as much as a classic the first one was, the second one did everything better. Improved art style, improved soundtrack, improved platforming gimmicks. Everything is just either slightly or significantly improved, and this is by far one of my favorite games of all time. I can't go 1 year without replaying this masterpiece. But before I reveal the number 1 choice, here are some honorable mentions that you may be upset that didn't make the final cut, but at least I'm including them in the honorable mentions.
And the #1 SNES game of all time is...
The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past. I know, it's so cliche for that to be the #1 spot of a top 10 Super Nintendo games list, but let me defend my position.
I know many people think this game is overrated, but I always like this game. Its art style is simple yet charming. Its story is a little confusing regarding the reveal of Aghanim later in the game, but it did introduce many of the story and gameplay standards for the later Zelda games. The reason why I like this game so much is because after every playthrough, it's still just as fun and challenging as the last playthrough. I also love the world of Hyrule in this installment. It's a heck of a lot better than the blow-up-your-own-entrance mentality of the cryptic and barren wasteland that was Hyrule in the first Zelda game. I just enjoy this game too much, and if you don't, that's fine, but all I know is I really like this game, slightly more than all the other entries in this list.
My top 10 favorite Super Nintendo games list. Yes, I have to remind you guys what you just watched. Common with most outro sequences in top 10 lists. Anyways, leave me a comment in the comment section below. Tell me some of your favorite Super Nintendo games. Heck, even leave a video response if you already made a top 10 Super Nintendo games list or a top 5. I will allow it for this one time, this one special occasion. Of course, I will have to approve of those video link comments, but I'll get to those as quickly as possible, I can guarantee that. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching, and whether you agree or disagree, remember to stay awesome.